It's a very clever, basic exploitation of the lack of economic understanding of the American voter.
The American voter is too stupid to understand the difference.
And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter.
Straight from the horse's mouth, Jonathan Gruber telling you that the architects of Obamacare think that you're stupid. And most importantly, they are absolutely counting on your lack of economic understanding. They aren't the only villains in this story, though. They are also depending on the liberal media to help them cover up the truth. So far, NBC, ABC, the LA Times, and the Associated Press, and others have been only too happy to comply. Those outlets have not even mentioned the video evidence from Jonathan Gruber. It is shocking, but it actually doesn't surprise me, because when I was at CNBC, I pointed out to my viewers that the math of Obamacare simply didn't work. Not the politics, by the way, just the basic math. And when I did that, I was silenced. I said on the air that you couldn't add millions of people to the system and force insurance companies to cover their pre-existing conditions without raising the price on everyone else. I pointed out that it couldn't possibly be true that if you like your plan, you can keep it. That was a lie. And in fact, millions of people had their insurance canceled. As a result of what I said at CNBC, I was called into management, where I was told that I was, quote, disrespecting the office of the president by telling what turned out to be the absolute truth. This Fox Business is the only network, and Fox News not complicit in the campaign to keep you in the dark. Don't trust the other guys. I can tell you firsthand, they are willing participants in the campaign to keep the economic truth from you. Don't let them do it. Joining me now with reaction, media expert and Fox News media analyst Howard Kurtz. Howard, thanks for joining us. Does my story surprise you?
Only the fact that it was so blatant that you were called in and told you're disrespecting the president. We're supposed to aggressively cover policy debates like Obamacare. And by the way, the pages of the New York Times in the newspaper still have not covered this. And we're on day 5 of what we call here Grubergate, and there's still a partial blackout. CBS and the Washington Post have now caught up and realized this is a real story. But the rest of them, not so much.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I remember telling people about this at the time. That I was told, I was quieted by saying you're disrespecting the office of the president. Why do you think media outlets don't want to cover this? I mean, are they true believers? Do they think their viewers don't want to hear it? What is it?
I'm not somebody who runs around crying bias in a crowded theater,
right.
But there really is no other explanation here. Sometimes, especially television has limited time on the broadcast networks, there are other stories that dominate. But nobody in America has Ebola anymore, so there's no excuse there. I think that either subconsciously they're rationalizing, well, who is this guy, Jonathan Gruber? Well, as you know, it's a guy who was paid $400,000 by the Obama administration to consult on Obamacare, or they simply are trying to protect the president. I really can't come up with another explanation. Yeah. Even if originally you thought, it doesn't really grab me, it has reached fever pitch here. I mean, members of Congress are talking about it. The White House is being asked about it. That's news. I
want to bring in Charlie Gasparino because he was, of course, at CNBC as well. Are you surprised by my story?
I quite frankly am surprised. Listen, I'm not surprised by liberal bias. I mean, I've worked in the mainstream media throughout my career. I guess you could say I'm right of center. I've never held that. My feelings about I'm a devotee of the free markets. I've never held back on that. Mm-hmm. And I have seen the way it works, but it's usually, as Howard said, a lot more subtle. I will say this, though.
Yeah.
I know Mark Hoffman, who runs CNBC. I actually think he's a decent guy. I know Nick Diogan's a friend of mine. He runs the news operations, decent guy. But I will say this, and here's one of the chilling aspects of working in the mainstream media. Two points. When I was at Newsweek, when it looked like the exit polls were in and George W. Bush was going to lose to John Kerry, people were doing high fives in the newsroom. I'll tell you that. That's one. The second thing is there was a thing in CNBC right after the elections when President Obama first took office. The markets are getting crushed. The markets were scared about Obamanomics and his ability to lead. Tim Geithner didn't lend a lot of courage and confidence in the markets. And we, as a network, started talking about that. No sooner did we talk about that than Jeff Immelt, the head of GE, which owned CNBC at the time, called a meeting of senior senior people, including mostly anchors. They didn't call me, thank God. And they basically had a discussion about whether CNBC was being fair to the president. We should point out that GE got a lot of largesse.
This was around that same time.
Received a lot of largesse from the Obama administration over the years. Now, did they tell you during this meeting? Did they tell the people during this meeting that go easy on Obama? No, but there is a chilling effect when your boss calls you in and says, by the way, and it's not just your boss, it's the head of GE. Everybody's sitting around, and you're saying, oh, are we being fair to the president by pointing out that his economic theories make no sense, or whatever we were doing? That's the mainstream media. People attack Fox all the time, and we give the other side all the time.
Even if you want to argue that the Gruber comments aren't very important, or you want to challenge his economics, fine, but cover the story. Right. It's this head in the sand approach that I find inexcusable.
But Howie, what do you think of calling people in a room and saying, "Are we being fair to the president?" Does that strike you? I mean, you came from the newspaper business. I did too. You worked at the Post. I worked at the Wall Street Journal and Newsweek. Even though they were high-fiving at Newsweek, I was never called in a room by Mark Whitaker and said, we being too tough on, this Democrat or that Republican. I mean, it just never happened like that.
It's important to note, that in my 3 years now here at Fox Business, I have never been told once, what to say or what not to say. Not even close. Yep. I mean, and I don't know anyone here who has. And I think what's really appalling about what happened to me at CNBC is the idea that I have a degree in economics from Harvard. I'm talking about math. I'm talking about simply when you add more people to the system and you add more cost, that cost has to be borne somewhere. Now, you can decide, as some of our viewers who have tweeted me have said, I think it makes sense that people pay more money. We need to cover more people. Fine. But you need to understand the math and know the facts to make the right decision. And what Gruber's saying is that a lot of folks were counting on people in the audience not to understand the math. I was trying to illuminate the math, and I was stopped dead in my tracks. And that's why this story is important.
Who stopped you, by the way?
I don't want to say the name of the person. It wasn't Mark Hoffman, though.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll give you the last word. What do you think, Howard?
I think you just made some news. But that's the point is, let's have the debate and have the impact on Obamacare. Open enrollment starts tomorrow for the program. I just don't understand, I'm all for fairness, and I'm all for telling both sides. But when you suppress information like this Gruber video, it just doesn't add up.
Okay. Guys, thanks to both of you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.